We are a podcast for product marketers and B2B SaaS who feel misunderstood of what they do.
From someone who truly gets what you do and
basically help you feel less like a misfit, being unignorable in your role.
And Zach, we'll let you introduce our special guest.
Yo, gents, thank you so much. We got to give it up because, before she hopped on this mic, I had to pull out Thor's hammer out of the closet and toss it her way because not only is she an excellent copywriter, she is a conversion content marketer. So she knows how to take from the top of level, you're talking blogs, infographics, industry reports, guiding like listeners, readers from the top to like, how is that going to reflect across business goals? She's also the founder of the Remote Work Tribe as well. She's keeping busy. She's keeping active. She's had to ice her writing hand because she's been putting too many damn words on the piece of paper, hitting our goals. And we're excited to introduce Jessica Malnik to the audience today. And she's going to tell us more about copywriting, content marketing, the stuff that we say that we're good at, but she's actually a pro at. Jessica, we're so excited to have you on the show. What's cracking?
Yeah, you're far too kind. Thanks so much for having me, Zach.
You've heard a few episodes, and we got this spicy question for you. And it's only the one and only Gab Bujol that asked this question. So I'm going to pass him the mic right now.
6 out of 10 on the pronunciation, but I got you.
I'm sorry, it's the Mexico, it's my Spanish accent.
Yeah, Jessica, are product marketers actually marketers? Why or why not?
Oh, for sure, definitely marketers. I actually think product marketers are kind of like the Swiss Army knife of marketing because you kind of have to know a little bit of everything, if not a lot about everything, to be able to do that job really well.
I want to dive deeper. When we say Swiss Army knife, that's a term we say a lot. What does that look like to you from the content marketing standpoint, looking at a product marketer today?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if I'm thinking about product marketing holistically, whether you're kind of just in charge of a specific feature, an individual product, an entire product line, marketing it, like you really have to understand, obviously, I won't obviously talk about product marketing in general, but you really have to understand customer research, where your product overlaps with that, how to market it, having it at least an idea around different channels and where to go, being able to kind of communicate all of that. Yeah, that's why I'm kind of saying Swiss Army knife is you have to know a little bit about everything, or you have to be a little bit dangerous in terms of a wide way to be like some of the best product marketers I know have very diverse skill sets within marketing.
Executives care a lot about copy. When we think about a website, you think about what collateral is going out to customers, and it's more about sounding enterprise than the actual message. And that's like a lot of friction that we feel as product marketers. I'm curious, like from like past client engagements, like has this been something that you have seen when you are working with it? And if so, like what are the ways of how you've navigated that conversation?
If you really have to sound super enterprise, I try to walk that line as a copywriter of being like, okay, what is the main thing that our customers and our prospects are going to expect from this? What our stakeholders expect as well? And then also, like, how can we toy that line without coming across as what I'm going to call corporate smart? Where you just sound almost like basically, for lack of a better word, an AI bot that got an MBA degree.
Ooh, you took a shot at a lot of people on the line right now. An AI bot with an MBA degree. Okay. All right. So then I'm kind of confused here. Like what, like, and before I ask this next question, is there anything you guys want to chime in here?
No, I guess I'm curious. For most product marketers, they're going to have some type of hand in the messaging, and then we'll split it off. Someone will give that off to someone who's formally trained and can do the copy, and other times not. So regardless of those situations, how do you like, or what are some of the ways that you can take a core message from whether it be product marketing or maybe an early stage client who doesn't have someone in that role, and then work your magic. Actually turn it into something snappy and something that is end up being in a deliverable and not just in a strategy slide deck somewhere.
A lot of people think that's okay. Let's drop the humanity in it. And in my experience, it actually works better when you can carve in those kind of key messages. And obviously, working really, really closely to your point around working in those like really key messages for with product marketers directly, and also just adding in that humanity, that like human aspect that doesn't just need to be a thing for startups and small businesses, which is typically who I work with. I have some experience working with enterprise as well, but even with enterprise clients, it's still you're selling people, and the more you can relate to that, the better. Especially now, in the age of AI.
Absolutely. And I love, particularly that emphasis on people. Like, there's not a single business actually buying a product, right? There's always people doing it, and there's always their motivations, and obviously those are wrapped around a big bucket of OKRs and KPIs. But I really like that point and how that's where your focus lies when you start to take message to copy.
Now, I'd argue maybe that a lot of those words right now, without the right training behind it, can be a little bit mediocre, but that's a little bit me getting controversial there. But ever, like, when you can get to the point where, like, it's never been easier to write, it's never been harder to build relationships. And the more you can actually take that copy and messaging and actually build that relationship and build that trust, that's where the magic happens, in my experience.
It's funny, you can make people relate to you more when you make grammatical mistakes in your post because AI will never, right? You can have better relationship via email by using pattern interruption and making grammatical mistakes or forgetting to add an attachment. And all of that kind of compound, and that trust element is bringing me to my next question, which is when we're collaborating with content and with copywriting and all of that, like the PMM relationship is very important, right?
It's all about communication, right? The closer that you can get to the PMM and then also ideally to the customer as well, the better. So in my ideal client cases, and this is not always the case, but like in my ideal, it's okay, can I actually interview or at the very least listen to a bunch of customer interviews that a PMM did, or ideally do them myself? And then can I also interview and work really closely with the PMM to make sure that I'm getting all of the nuances? And then oftentimes as well, I'll layer in sales and I'll layer in customer success and things like that to be able to get kind of those really nuanced views, to make sure the copy is going to reflect those pure emotional pain points, goals, challenges in a way that can oftentimes get lost if you're just walking off of a creative brief that somebody wrote in 30 minutes. It was in my experience. What do you guys think?
Communication is front and center and should be done properly. I think oftentimes, you just have to deal with a bad card and you're kind of stuck with it a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the more we're able to, like, sometimes suggestion we set ourselves is, I think PMM oftentimes should do at least a starting point of the copy and then relying on the copywriter to understand, well, what are the gaps, what is missing, not necessarily to do the work instead of them, but doing it in a way where it's just more collaborative and feels like 0 to 1.
Totally.
I want to go back to what you said earlier about that human touch, because that's something I really struggle in when I'm writing for clients, is that if I get feedback of like, let's make this more human, it almost sounds like feedback that says like, be more clear. Like, what are the strategies? Like, what is your mindset when you are putting that pen to paper of like, how am I going to translate this message from product marketing into a message that deeply connects with the user without using jargon?
That's like basically, can you empathize with who is the ideal customer and really understand where are they coming from? What is kind of the goal that they have? Why are they picking your solution over a competitor? Or let's face it, oftentimes that competitor is inertia, like what we've always done before. What are their pain points? How can they, if it's an enterprise product, like how are they going to look? How can we make them look really good to their boss or in their boss's boss? Like really thinking through all of those questions. And like I said, in an ideal world, that usually starts with, as well as with customers as well. Typically, I usually recommend about 3, just to, from different kind of personas, just to be able to understand that. However, I know this is not always the case where either with time or resource constraints, you can't always do those interviews with customers or as many as you want. So there's also ways that you can kind of get that from my own experience using review sites. And then my personal favorite and probably the most untapped copywriting resource out there, which is Reddit.
Reddit, tell us more about that. Why would you say? What about Reddit? It's like, should I be looking at the Vanderpump Rules like Reddit thread for research? Like, give me more here. What's that?
I mean, there's a subreddit for just about anything on Reddit. And the thing about Reddit is people are, for good or bad, pretty honest on there. Maybe it's the anonymity of it, but there's a subreddit for almost anything. And if you go in there, dive a little bit deeper and really understand, okay, what are those topics that are coming up over and over again in the last year? Sometimes with manually, increasingly I'm using tools to do that, both AI and non-AI. Figure out, okay, what are the questions that are coming up all the time? What are the hot topics? What are the things that have some sort of controversy? And really starting to understand, okay, like putting like a mental model of who this ideal customer is and what they actually care about. And then it's just about kind of translating that in a way that actually sounds human, for lack of a better word.
Are you talking about tools like Gummy Search that can help you summarize like Reddit? It kind of taking subreddit together and creating personas, and then you can kind of run searches based on those personas to just nail things down a little bit more.
I don't think I've used that particular tool, but I've used quite a few other ones, and I'm always kind of testing out different ones.
Awesome, that's great. I got great insight from this.
Nice.
Jessica, tell us these tools. Like, our listeners got to know. Like, what are these tools you got in your back pocket?
For audience research, to kind of complement everything, one of my favorites at this moment is SparkDoro. That's kind of a bigger one for being able to kind of dive in with kind of get that landscape view of kind of your audience and understanding where they are. And then increasingly, I'm doing some things with AI tools that are various things, everything from clever ways to use ChatGPT and Claude to very niche tools to be able to kind of scrape data in a way faster, put it into a spreadsheet, and make it a little bit easier to analyze in bulk. Things that I used to have to spend hours doing, or more likely having my VA spend hours putting this in manually, now we can kind of do that a lot faster and be able to mine and see a lot more gaps that way. And then I'm always kind of utilizing actually ChatGPT and OpenAI to do a lot of data analysis to help me kind of spot those patterns within Reddit and review sites, to be able to kind of ingest a lot more data and get a lot more insights than I previously was able to do manually.
So are you sending them directly to a link on Reddit, or are you like copying like full threads? How's that working?
I'm usually copying full. Yeah, so great question. I'm usually copying kind of the title, the actual thread, and oftentimes it's a little bit of sorcery when it comes to technical scraping to put that into a spreadsheet, and then I will feed that into a CSV file, put that in back into ChatGPT, because ChatGPT is probably even better in my experience at data analysis and sentiment analysis than even as a writing. Not that that's people talking about all the time, and I'll be like, okay, create the sentiment for these 100 or these 1,000 comments. What are the common themes that are showing up over and over again? What are the common words? Create a word cloud. All of those things to be able to kind of process huge amounts of comments in a very short period of time.
Nice.
What I really like about what you're saying so far here, Jessica, is that like when I thought about copywriting, I thought about it. It's like, okay, I'm going to interview these customers, and I'm going to try to find these common themes, and I'm going to try to pull these words out onto paper by writing it in a different format or writing it in a different way. But what I really like what you're saying here is that you are like throwing yourself into the weeds here. You're getting that bigger picture. And it sounds like when you do that, it just makes it easier to kind of convey that, like what you said earlier, that human sentiment, that empathy in writing.
Yeah, absolutely. The best copywriting is literally just finding a way to say exactly what your customers are already saying. So I shouldn't have to be necessarily reinventing the wheel. I'm oftentimes just taking the exact words that customers and prospects are already saying and just slightly massaging it to make it stand out on the page. And in fact, whenever I feel like I have to get super creative, that's oftentimes when the copy becomes muddled and doesn't convert as well because it's not as clear.
Wow. And we're going to clarify real quick before the gent jump in here is that you're not rambling. You are cooking a 5-star meal. Look at so we in your corner, so it's highly encouraged. That was all I want to say here. But I'll hop off here because I know Eric's got something hot here, like cooking here.
Yeah. So, do you got any like instances where you're asked to write copy, but you're not given the message, and at least a clear message, right? Where you're almost being asked to be the messenger and the copywriter. What's that experience like? How do you get over some of that? And do you still work with clients who deliver that kind of experience?
Absolutely. I would say just in general, probably maybe even 50-50 between me coming in and helping with the messaging and however, I also work a lot with startups. So I'm pretty well versed in kind of figuring out, okay, like what is this key message? What are we trying to say here? How do we take all of the things out there and just kind of condense this in a way that's going to say what we need to say, where we need to say it, and how we need to say that. The one caveat being I don't work with companies that are pre-revenue. And that's just because it's not within my skill set. But I can definitely, typically saying on the smaller side when it comes to startups and or things like that, more often than not, I'm being brought in to also help out with that key messaging as well as the copy.
Nice. And do you find, especially with clients, do you like working with one or the other? I know you said working with an on-point PMM makes it a little bit easier, but do you like working a little bit of both sides of the fence and the copy and the messaging?
Yeah,
Or is
maybe
it
it's a
more of
little
a
bit of,
necessary evil?
I learn a lot on both sides of the key piece. And really diving deeper into positioning and messaging just makes me a better copywriter as well. So I'm really understanding the fundamentals. And it's almost can be a little bit easy to kind of get in the weeds of the copy and forget the voice of the customer, particularly if there's such a detailed brief. Now I have my own systems and processes for how I avoid that, but that was definitely something I struggled with early on as a copywriter. Being self-taught is like when I got a really detailed brief, sometimes I would almost forget some of the like basics of understanding customer psychology. But yeah, now I have kind of systems and processes to avoid that.
When you say detailed brief, I'm curious. Like, what were you seeing? Were they like giving you guys like their blood type and like
A typical messaging doc that, that you'd see any PMM write, probably, Zach?
their eye color? I'm curious. Like, what? Because I think that's helpful for me and like listeners. Like, what is too much detail when we are passing off messaging briefs?
I don't think there's anything. There are times where some of the details can get in the way. I can actually mask not being super clear in your key messaging. If you just give, and I will happily take all of the details out there. However, sometimes it particularly working with someone who maybe is a little bit newer or a little bit greener in their career, they could get so overwhelmed because I also know I did this as well. You get so in the weeds that you kind of forget to kind of see the forest from the trees and you forget about getting really clear on kind of your customer persona and your key message.
Yeah, good call. I have a question for you related to basically there's a bunch of everyone focused on the trend of personal brand
Mm-hmm.
and just trying to expand it and ultimately take the solopreneur route as we all did. A big part of that, I think, for some people is writing on LinkedIn, and this is when like conversion content and copywriting really much goes into play. I don't know if you have any tips for fractional PMMs are trying to, get business on LinkedIn that you're seeing that is like, those are the biggest mistakes I've seen around copywriting or conversion content writing. I don't know if you have some stuff to share for our audience.
Yeah, one of the biggest mistakes I've seen a lot of people make is obsessing so much over getting attention and going viral that it comes at the expense of their own credibility. Leaning into so for example, how do I say this in a way that doesn't, let me think about how to say this. Leaning into insane gimmicks that have nothing to do with the message of your LinkedIn post might get you more views and might help you go viral, but you might be going viral on the LinkedIn lunatic subreddit. And I'm not really sure that as a fractional PMM, you want to be on that subreddit, especially if you're trying to be on LinkedIn to get clients. Now, if you're on LinkedIn to be able to build a course and you need 100,000 people, then leaning to some of those gimmicks to get that virality can sometimes work. However, that's not the game that I play on LinkedIn. I'm kind of there for lead gen and kind of flexing my skills and learning and connecting. In those scenarios, like being aware of what your goal is and knowing that not every gimmick or every tactic on LinkedIn is going to be best served for your individual goals.
I don't know, Jessica. If I'm featured on LinkedIn Lunatics, I might just use that as social proof and put it on my website and say, "Yo,
Go for it.
I know how to get
You
attention."
can't
I,
please
I
everyone, but I understand that sometimes there's gimmicks that ultimately won't give you a good look and can ultimately cost you some business. But if you always chase engagement instead of revenue, like like or not bringing you money,
Yeah.
that's the thing.
Absolutely. And I would also just say in general, like some of the more extreme examples of that is like the things that get memed and also where it's like the really like gimmicky CEO selfie thing where it's like, oh, woe is me. I decided to lay off my entire team. And then let's somehow make this all about me. That's just not a good look. Is that going to go viral? Absolutely. Do you want to go viral for that reason? I would argue no.
Yeah, my favorite one is what getting married teach me about
Yeah.
B2B sales. Like this one killed me.
Yeah. It just feels gross to me. But hey, if that's kind of the game, again, everyone has their own goals with LinkedIn as well. So it's like if your goal is to build the biggest audience possible on LinkedIn, then maybe you should lean into that sort of thing because you're going to get a lot of eyeballs. However, yeah, if your other goals, that strategy doesn't work as well, at least from my own experience.
Jessica, you mentioned where creativity might muddle conversion. Reference to the LinkedIn gimmicks. Is that like an example of where like being creative might is like what they'd be like, Zach, what the hell are you doing? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. And I can even go back to an example of of a mistake I've made on LinkedIn early on was getting so invested in the story I was telling that I forgot actually the reason people care about that story and all is what's in it for them. Why are they going to care? And what's that key takeaway? So the same goes for creativity within your copy. It's in it for your customers. What is that key takeaway or that big idea that you want to share? And then any sort of creative element or any sort of story should supplement that and kind of help you keep people's attention, but it shouldn't be the only thing there.
what's in it for them? No, that's a very powerful point here.
My biggest leave behind would probably be like, I think a lot of people who are listening are going to want to follow along, kind of like Zach teed up. Um, Copywriting is a skill that any marketer, especially product marketers, need to get better at, especially in internal communications when they're communicating their own projects and ideas. So we'd love to know where we can find you. We'd love to know, do you have any projects coming up that you want to tease out? Any parting tips that you have for our audience on how to just be better copywriters?
Yeah, I mean, do you want me to kind of share a quick tip or like just another quick tip around how to showcase your personal brand on LinkedIn?
Heck
Hell
yeah.
yeah!
Let's go.
So in general, there's three different types of posts that in my experience work pretty well on LinkedIn. One, there's kind of the big picture idea where it's like kind of an industry landscape or something kind of zooming out on the big picture. Then I call it like the in the weeds tactical post, which is, hey, this is, this really practical copywriting lesson that I learned this week. Here's what I learned. Here's the takeaway. And then there's a third type of post that I'm calling the money post. These are the posts that are not necessarily designed to go viral, get a lot of views, but they're things that are helping you go take that rented audience on LinkedIn back to your own channels. So it could be like a link to a podcast episode. It could be, in my case, my Throw My Workshop podcast. It could be a link to my newsletter to subscribe. It could be a call out to let's work together, that sort of thing. And like those are kind of the three core posts where it's like that big picture, the in the weeds, and then there's also that like money post. And kind of figuring out what that right mix is for you and maybe adding on top of that, like trends, predictions, that sort of thing, can go a very long way to being cohesive as in your marketing strategy in LinkedIn.
That's awesome.
That's fire. Yep.
I'm here for that. So Jessica, tell us, like, how can we, outside of the podcast here, stay connected with you and for our listeners who are following along?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have some of my best resources in a curated landing page that will be live by the time this episode goes live. If you just go to my own website, well, I have two, but if you just go to jessicamalnik.com/we're not marketers, you can kind of get all of my kind of curated resources and also sign up to be a part of the newsletter, which is where I share tips to help founders, CEOs, marketing leaders, product managers lead better remote teams.
Amazing.
That's
I think this is our
awesome.
first
I
time-
can't
this is
wait
our
to
first
get
time
my
on our
free
backside.
edition.
Yo, this is the first time
Can't
we've
wait.
been added on the backslash of a
Yeah.
landing page. I'm like, yo, we made it.
Let's note the date. Note the date.
Always
Jessica, thank
marketer.
you. So, oh, look, you said at the beginning of the conversation, product marketers are marketers. You know, we might have a disagreement, but one thing we can align on to is that we had a damn good time on this conversation here. So thank you again for sharing these tips here, diving deep, giving us like the best practices of like how we might use AI, how we get knee deep into the research of like being better copywriters in our craft too, and from someone who's doing the damn thing. So we first of all appreciate you sharing this time with us, and thank you again for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you again for having me.
All right, but team,
Thank
this
you.
is it. This is our episode of We're Not Marketers signing off. Thanks again for joining.
Awesome. Thank
Bye
you.
bye. Thank you for listening to We're Not Marketers. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, review our podcast, and share this episode with other PMMs. Thanks again, and see you soon.